Welcome to a session of Soundtrack of My Life, where I say that life is a mixtape. As a person who loves music and is very connected to music, I share different songs that remind me of different stories from Israel. And after about 4 months of running these sessions every week, this is going to be our last one, unfortunately. But it's time for me to take a break from that one to bring new things to you in the future. And today I decided to do something special. Today we're not going to hear recordings of music. You're going to hear me play live some of my songs to really hear the soundtrack of my life and a taste of a few other songs that really formed my musical identity and who I am. And I'm going to tell you my story, my personal story, and the Israeli story through that. So we're going to start. I would love to say, whenever you have a question or a comment, you can either write in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask the question, make your comment, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's start. I released an album in 2017 that is called Like We Used To. It's actually an album that is made out of two albums, one in Hebrew and an equivalent one in English, where I translated the songs from Hebrew to English. They were all written originally in Hebrew. And the theme song is called Like We Used To. This photo was taken in Jerusalem, right next to where my grandparents used to live. And this staircase reminds me of my childhood. The places where I used to run around and gave it, a taste of who I am and the memories of my childhood. So I called it Like It Used To, and I would love to play the theme song for you. Just like we used to when we took our time to breathe and forgot about all the fears. Just like we used to when the trouble knows nowhere to be seen, when it was just you and me. It's like we used to, but not the same. In our eyes are the hands of time, and a smile that has seen so much. And we're trying, you're still around. Remember how it used to be when we took the trails to go nowhere. In the days when we were still allowed to dream, and a dream became real in a way. It's like we used to, but not the same. In our eyes are the hands of time, and a smile that has seen so much. And we're trying, we're still around. We're still around. Maybe it's time to try again. Open a window for the chance that even though the time flew by, it doesn't mean we won't have it again. It's like we used to, but not the same. In our eyes are the hands of time, and a smile that has seen so much. And we're trying. It's like we used to, but not the same. And if a little boy could fly, if an old dream would rise, then we're trying. We're still around. you're still around. So, thank you for the clapping. Um, this is my introduction. This song, for me, talks about that inner child that never goes away, and this is a way I try to live my life with keeping my dreams alive and keeping dreams, making dreams come true, reminding myself of who I was as a young boy running through these stairs next to my grandparents' house or other trails. Now, there's a story behind the song, and I'm going to introduce you to my family and to myself through this. Um, there's a line here. When we took the trails to go nowhere. The original line in Hebrew says, "Kshehayinu metaylim leibud," when we would travel to ibud. That means actually, leibud is to get lost, to go and be lost. My niece, the one in the circle, she is my second niece out of three from my brother, who you can see here in the photo with his family. He's my older brother. So that middle niece, when she was 3, she was upset with her parents, and she said, "You know what? I'm going to go into the elevator, and I'm going to get lost." And there was something there about the concept of using that word ibud, like it's a place, like getting lost is actually going to a certain place. And from there, I took that line and started thinking about being a child and how you view the world in such a way when you're still allowed to dream. And that's how this song came to be. And for me, it's one of my favorite songs that I wrote, if I may say so myself. I've written quite a few, just because it reminds me all the time to remember that even though, time flew by, even though, you can see the hands of time on our eyes, the smile is not the same because time has passed, but still, all this, all the dreams and this inner child is still there. So I'm going to tell you about myself, my childhood, my family. There's a question, how old is she now? She is turning 8. No, she is 8 years old already. So it was quite a long time ago. A little bit about myself. I was born in 1983. I'm that little cute button right here in the middle. To my parents, and my name is Shai, which means in Hebrew means a gift, a present. I was a gift to my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, and my older sister, who's 2 years older than me. And they welcomed me wonderfully. My joke is always that they tried to return the present, but the store wouldn't take me back, so they got stuck with me actually for forever. This is my beautiful mother. Once again, this is 37 years ago, but still very beautiful still. And this is my father. I grew up in Jerusalem. I'm going to show you exactly where on the map in a second. I was born and grew up in Jerusalem, and we used to travel. This is in the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. You can see my older brother in the background, and this is me with my father as a little boy stepping into the water. We used to love traveling different places, north and south. There's a thing about Israelis, about traveling and learning and loving our country with our feet, as we say. Going to the places, seeing the history, seeing the sights that is so meaningful to us. In my family, my parents tried to give it to us as much as they could. These are my parents 10 years ago. You can see these beautiful, beautiful people. My father here is wearing a uniform, but he's not in the IDF right now. My father served 4 years in the IDF, the 3 mandatory years and an extra year as an officer. He served on reserve duty on the Yom Kippur War, and he continued serving on reserve duty, being called over and over again through the years, and he made it to the rank of lieutenant colonel quite a few years ago. I think it was in the year 2000 or 2001. And in this photo, you can see the pride in my mother's eyes. I love this photo because they look beautiful, but also it tells so much. My father in 2010 was selected to join a mission that is called Edim B'Madim, witness in uniform, when military people are taken to see and witness the death camps of the Holocaust in Europe. And they go through a journey for several days and hear testimonies and see the places where the horrors took place. And this is at the airport before he left. And my father, not being a military man, but he is still in reserve duty till this day. He's actually just celebrated his 69th birthday in May. And this past and last year, in 2019, he received a certificate for 50 years of service, including his mandatory service, being an officer in reserve duty. He received that, and he still is going on reserve duty. I used to serve, I still do serve in reserve duty. I'm now in the States, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But he does more reserve than I do, and I do quite a bit. So that's this is the household I grew up in, a household that loves Israel, that shares a lot of strong values for our country, but mostly people-to-people values. I really appreciate my parents teaching me how to be a strong person. And there is a saying in Hebrew, we say, Tov Shem Tov Mishemen Tov. It's better to have a good reputation than to have wealth, in a way. And this is what I took from my parents, who I love dearly. And this is me and my siblings. In the back, you see my older brother. This is his 40th birthday last year. Then there's me. Right underneath me is my older sister, and then my youngest sister. She's 7 years old, younger than me. There's the four of us, and my brother, as you saw, has a family with three beautiful, beautiful daughters who I miss so much because I haven't seen them in a year. But this is a little bit about my family and where I come from. And as I said, I was born and grew up in Jerusalem. I've lived in Jerusalem all my life. This is a map of the municipal border of Jerusalem. I was born and raised in Neve Yaakov, right here in the north of Jerusalem. And you can see the red line right here. The red line is what we call the green line, actually, in Israel. This whole territory to the east of that line was actually, between 1948 and 1967, was under Jordanian ruling. And in 1967, the Six-Day War, it was liberated by the IDF. And my parents chose to live here in Neve Yaakov, which is an area close to Shu'afat, which is an Arab village and a refugee camp, Palestinian refugee camp, and close to what we call Palestinian areas. I remember as a child, we used to drive next to Shu'afat, and at certain points, things got heated up a little bit. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but we did feel the atmosphere heating up with the Palestinian population around us. So I grew up there until the age of 7, and in the early 1990s, there was a huge immigration wave from the former Soviet Union, and a lot of the immigrants arrived in different outskirts neighborhoods of Jerusalem, including Neve Yaakov. Not only that, a lot of ultra-Orthodox people started coming to the neighborhood. The elementary school I went to for first grade before we left, within 2 years became an Orthodox school. So my parents thought this is not a place for us who are traditional or more towards the secular side. So they decided to leave and move towards here, southwest of the city, where they still live until now. And I grew up here most of my life. And Neve Yaakov, that neighborhood I grew up in, actually became, unfortunately, one of the lower socioeconomic status in Jerusalem for many, many years, with immigrants and with ultra-Orthodox population. So my parents chose, before that happened, they could see what's coming, and they chose to leave that area.
So where did you say you live now? Or
so around this area, this is Malcha, a neighborhood at the southwest of Jerusalem, but I actually lived in Ramat Denia, which is 2 minutes from Malcha. And then my parents moved to I started in Ramat Sharet, then Ramat Denia, neighborhoods that are basically almost the same neighborhood. Then I lived in Kiryat Yovel, all about 5 minutes from each other, neighborhoods that are 5 minutes from each other. I also lived in city center, right by the Shuk for a while. If you know the Shuk, Machne Yehuda market in Jerusalem, I lived right on the Shuk for a while, and then right on Ben Yehuda Street for a while. And just before I came back here, I moved back to this area for 3 years. So music is my passion, and it started at a very, very young age with different artists like this one, which I'm sure you recognize, right? Elvis Presley. My mom is a huge, huge Elvis Presley fan, and I grew up with his records and listening to his music. And I used to look at him with the guitar, and I wanted to pick up one. And at the age of 14, I finally started studying guitar. My dad played guitar a little bit when he was a teenager. He never continued playing, so he doesn't really know how to play, but we always had that guitar. He never put strings on it because no one played. And as a kid, we had one string on the guitar, and I would pretend to play when I was a toddler. And after many years, I picked up my father's guitar, put strings on it, started going, learning with a teacher, and then on my own how to play. And one of my favorite, you're gonna have a few tastes of different songs today. One of my most favorite Elvis Presley songs is this one. Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? I think this is one of the first songs I can say that I remember. There were a few, but definitely this one. And I wanted to be Elvis Presley in a way, dance like him and do all that. So that was one of my inspirations for music. But another one was also Uzi Chitman. Uzi Chitman passed away, unfortunately, quite a while ago in 2004. And he is one of my favorite songwriters in Israeli music. He wrote Adon Olam, maybe a version that you know. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra. He wrote the tune to that in 1976. He wrote a lot of children's songs, but he also composed and wrote so many songs that made it to the mainstream music in Israel. But there was something so kind and simple about Uzi Chitman always. He performed in so many TV shows for kids and had video cassettes with children's songs. And for me, he's a part of the Israeli story. Now, some of you have joined me in previous sessions in the past, so you might recognize some of the topics I'm going to talk about today. And one of them, I think the first session I had for Soundtrack of My Life, had the song Ratziti Sheteda that Uzi Chitman wrote in 1977. It's a song that talks about peace, that talks about the lack of peace and the dream of peace. That as a young boy, I used to love this song. I'm going to sing just a snippet of it in a minute. But growing up in Israel, that the topic of peace is something that is always on the table. Towards peace or the lack of peace and everything. And as I mentioned, and I'll talk about it more, we felt it as a growing child in the 80s and 90s, in Jerusalem mostly, could definitely feel the impact of the lack of peace. So this song, I wanted you to know, Ratziti Sheteda. I'm going to sing just, a small part of it, but you can follow with the lyrics here. Elohim sheli, רציתי שתדע, חלום שחלמתי בלילה במיטה, ובחלום ראיתי מלאך, משמיים בא אליי ואמר לי כך, באתי משמיים, עברתי נדודים, לשאת ברכת שלום לכל הילדים, לשאת ברכת שלום לכל הילדים. וכשהתעוררתי נזכרתי בחלום, ויצאתי לחפש מעט שלום, ולא היה מלאך ולא היה שלום, ומזמן הלך אני עם החלום. So this song talks about a child that dreams about peace and dreams about an angel saying that he's come to bring peace, but when the child wakes up, there is no peace. And that was Uzi Chitman's cry to the leaders of Israel and to everyone to try to make it happen. And as I said, 1987, when I was 4, the first Intifada broke, and being, I showed you where we lived, close to a Palestinian refugee camp in a village. Sometimes our car would get hit with rocks. Sometimes people would get hit with Molotov cocktail bottles and different things, and definitely felt that growing up in Jerusalem in the early 90s, a lot of suicide bombings, and that affected my life. And my father, who I told you is on reserve duty very much. When I grew up in the late 80s, he was gone a lot because of that, contributing to what he can do and all that. And that really formed who I am as an Israeli, I think, and as a young boy when it came to my future and what it held. Speaking of peace, the peace treaty, the peace process with the Oslo Accords in 1993 by Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat received a Nobel Peace Prize for that. Starting to see the seeds of peace coming. 1994, a peace treaty with Jordan. I remember watching it on TV and talking about all this in school. And then came November 4th, 1995. An evening, it was Motzei Shabbat, and there was a huge rally for peace in Kikar Melchei Israel, the square of Kings of Israel that is now Kikar Rabin in Tel Aviv, where he stood on stage and gave speeches talking about promoting the peace, saying yes to peace and no to violence. The very last thing he did on the stage was sing the song that I'm going to sing a part of it in a second. That became his symbol. I'm going to sing the song and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. And right after he sang the song, he got off the stage and was assassinated by Yigal Amir with 3 shots to his back. Due to his trying to create a peace process for disagreements, he was assassinated as a prime minister for disagreements in the society. And we're arriving, it's almost Tisha B'Av, and it's so important to mention that with everything going on in Israel now, I don't know if you have watched the news and know what's going on, but there are a lot of protests and there's a lot of turmoil in Israel around disagreements. And we all know that we say that Tisha B'Av, that the destruction of the temple came because of hate for no cause, and this is a part of it. So the last song he sang, and they found the note, a piece of paper with the lyrics, that the piece of paper that he's holding here on stage, they found it on his body with blood stains after the assassination, is Shir LaShalom. תנו לשמש לעלות, לבוקר להאיר, הזעקה שבתפילות אותנו לא תעיר. מי אשר קבע נרו ובעפר נטמע, וחימר לא יאירו, לא יחזירו לך. איש אותנו לא ישיב, מפה תחתית אפל, כאן לא יועילו לו שמחת הניצחון, ולא שירי הלב. לכן רק שירו, שיר השלום, אל תלחשו תפילה. מוטב תשירו, שיר השלום, ניצח גדולה. So this song that was actually written, it was sang by Le'akat HaNachal, a military band. Up until 1978, military bands were the stars of Israel. And then they were disbanded. They created the biggest stars that we had in Israeli rock and Israeli mainstream music for many, many years. Le'akat HaNachal sang this in 1970. But for many, many people, especially, and I'm going to generalize and say for many people, especially the younger people who were born around the time of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination, but not only, this song is connected directly to Yitzhak Rabin. Like it never existed before, but it's connected to the assassination. And every time I hear the song, it brings those memories. The song is like the let the sunshine in for Israel in a way, but completely turned into something different that symbolizes the fight for peace in a different way, and the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. And I remember that night when it happened, we were watching TV. I was in 7th grade, and all of a sudden there was a news break um, sharing that he was assassinated. And later on, they shared that he died in the hospital. And that was a huge heartbreak and a crisis, because we all felt as young kids, and we were taught that peace is coming, and in a second was abrupted by this act of violence. But as we know, life goes on, and in Israel, when you turn 18, and some of you have seen this photo many times in my sessions, you turn 18 and you join the military, you join the IDF, and as you've seen, I come from a house that military service is very important to, and contributing to society in my country through that. So I joined it was November 26th, 2001. This is a photo of me, this weird young man here next to my friend Arik, in basic training. I had basic training for 2 months, and then I joined in for 6 extra months of advanced training in my field of electronic warfare, special communications. I served, after going through the training for 8 months total, I joined an operational platoon where we would go and take part in special operations out anywhere. It could be that on Sunday I will be in the border of Lebanon, and Monday I'm going to be in Gaza, and then Thursday I'm going to spend a few days in the West Bank or other places. Or sometimes we just go and practice to be prepared for any scenario needed. If it's just us practicing, or with different units, different sizes of drills. And I spent 3 years in that platoon. The last year of the time there, I was a special commander in charge of training new soldiers in the platoon and taking any new systems that we got, learning the systems and teaching them to new soldiers in our unit. So I was in charge of enrichment and all that for my platoon, while I took part in different operations. And there are many stories that I shared in different places about different operations. I'm not going to go through that now. And then I was just about to get discharged. I was supposed to serve for 3 years, and usually you get what we call chafshash, chufshat shichrur. They give you a few weeks to kind of take the load off before you get discharged, start to get things set for when you become a civilian. And when I was on my vacation, I got a phone call saying, look, we have one of the officers leaving, and we want you to stay in an officer's position only for 6 months. Will you do it? I said, look, I have a vacation now for 2 weeks. I need to think about it. They said, okay, think about it, let us know. And the day I was supposed to be discharged, I actually came in to sign on for extra 6 months. And this is a photo that I really, really love, that symbolizes a lot. This is me and my father when I was still in service, and he was on reserve duty in one of those drills that I told you about. He came to visit me, and just shows generation to generation. I had the privilege of sharing my birthday with him in 2005 when we went to a drill together in the north of Israel. It was my birthday. We drove up there together. We spent 3 days there. I was doing my thing. He was doing his thing. He came to where I was sitting to learn, and for me to teach his friends what I was doing. It was so great to see him so proud, and I was so proud myself. So I was supposed to stay only for 6 months, but then this big thing happened in 2005. There was the disengagement plan. In 2005, disengagement from Gaza and parts of the West Bank. So they asked me to stay a bit longer, so I stayed on in this position of in an officer's position, even though I wasn't an officer. I was in charge of special operations in my unit, and one of the things that I had to deal with was everything that my unit had to do during the disengagement plan for Gaza, from Gaza. 22 settlements in the Gaza Strip were evacuated, and basically the Gaza Strip was completely evacuated from Israeli presence, military or civilian, and also 4 settlements in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. This was a crisis. This was a big crisis in Israeli society. There were 2 sides, those who supported it and thought that this will bring peace, and those who didn't. So due to that, they asked me to stay longer, and I stayed for a total of 1 year a month and 6 days, but who's counting, in extra service. And I had to deal with this and other operations. And this was what we thought would be the war of our generation. If my parents had Yom Kippur War and then the First Lebanon War and Intifada, for me as a soldier, we had different operations, but this was the major event. And we thought this was going to be the biggest event for my generation, our service, or around our time. Little did we know what's going to happen next year, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Since then, I got discharged on January 1st, 2006, and I've been serving in a special platoon on reserve duty. This is actually from a year ago, my last drill that I went with my platoon before I came here to the States to serve as a shaliach. This is one squad of my platoon in a special drill that we had the pleasure of taking part in. I miss those guys. There's something about being with them that is like family, going on our Jeep, being out there, not showering for 2 weeks, drinking a lot of Turkish coffee, strong black Turkish coffee, playing sheshbesh, backgammon attacks, and playing war and getting ready for the day that we might be called and it might be necessary for us to be there. And it's amazing because I can share that, and I shared it last week, I think, my platoon commander, who's right here, actually won a certificate, a special certificate from the Chief of Staff of the IDF this year for our platoon and his service. My platoon has one of the highest percentage of actually reporting to reserve duty. 70% of the IDF force is actually reserve and not those who are in service right now. And out of those, only 6% of Israeli society actually serve on reserve duty, and out of the entire society, only 1.5% actually serve a significant amount of 20 days in 3 years. So my platoon is special, and I'm so proud to be a part of it, and I miss them already. 2006, I got discharged, and then I decided I'm going to be a shaliach at a summer camp in the United States. So after serving for 4 years, I learned that the Jewish Agency for Israel has this program of summer camp shlichim. We go to Jewish summer camps. The Jewish Agency now sends 1,500 shlichim every summer to over 200 summer camps in North America and Canada and the States in different positions, being counselors, with it could be music instructors or sports. I started as a sports specialist because I did martial arts, or a drama specialist, or general counselors, or boating, or any sort of thing that summer camps do. When I grew up in Israel, there was no such thing as an overnight camp. It's just not in our culture. So dreaming about going and being next to a lake and sleeping in a cabin, everything that I saw in movies was such a great thing that I wanted to do. And I went there in 2006. That was my first summer there. You can see me here on Israel Day, where we celebrate Israel. We're getting ready with inflatable toys and different things to try and bring the joy of Israel to our camp. And that was a summer that opened up my heart to a lot of things. I was a counselor at a youth movement in Israel, Hanor Ovid Valomed, when I was in high school. I was a counselor at day camps, and I loved education. But coming to a summer camp that is the peak of the non-formal education was just something that I fell in love with. Another thing that I fell in love with was community and the sense of Jewish community in so many ways that summer camps bring. That is so wonderful, but also the embrace that you get when you're in such a strong community. Because in 2006, a few things happened. Gilad Shalit was abducted in Gaza, and he was held captive for 5 years in Gaza until he was released. 2 reserve duty soldiers were kidnapped and killed on the border of Lebanon, which started the Second Lebanon War. If I said before that I thought that the disengagement in 2005 would be the war of my generation, we were mistaken. Came 2006 and we had a terrible war, the Second Lebanon War. And I had to watch all this from afar, seeing all this happening while I'm playing with kids on the bank of a lake on the lawn. Just felt so disconnected. My friends are in Lebanon. My platoon is in Lebanon. My father is on reserve duty. My sister's boyfriend is in Lebanon. And I felt so far away. But I had great friends there that embraced me and helped me deal with it, which was wonderful and made me want to return and go back again and again to summer camp. The next year, 2007, I came back. I asked for the oldest campers, who were a group of wild animals. Um, but I worked with them in such a way that I found a way to crack a method. I found a method that actually years later I developed into a model that I'm actually right now writing a book about, how to manage behavior in a way of not becoming the wall, the adult or authority that says, don't do this, but finding and helping them, finding an alternative to do the right thing. In short, the story behind this, they wanted to break to the arts room, take spray paint, and paint graffiti in the at camp. I managed to make them reconsider it, and I gave them a different option. It ended up being making a question mark in the middle of the night with water cups. From graffiti and making and creating damage to something like this, they felt, and I quote, badasses that day. But it took it out of their system. It was amazing, and this took me to a journey of being an educator. I realized those 2 summers at camp that this is, for me, my calling to be an educator, to find a way to relate to people, to connect to people, and connect people together. And some of them are still in touch with me. This is 2007. 3 weeks ago, I talked to one of them, and I met a few of them a year ago when I was visiting the Boston area. But this, for me, was the doorway to education, non-formal education that I love so much. So when I finished that summer, my second summer at camp, I went to study in Hebrew University in Jerusalem, the first university in Israel, founded in 1925. The university itself was, this area was an enclave until 1967, Israeli enclave. There was reunited with Jerusalem in 1967. So I studied theater and education. I have a love for the arts, for the stage, and I combined theater and education. And I'm proud to say that I've been able to use both in my careers, both my stage career and educational career throughout the years. I finished my studies in 2011. And through those years, I continued. In 2008, I continued going to camp. In 2010, I went to camp again. 2011, I went to another camp that was a combination of an Israeli campers and American campers. And all this time, keep working with American Jewish communities. During my studies in Hebrew U, in my theater department, I found an opportunity to study and learn how to become a clown, but not just a clown, learn how to be a medical clown, a hospital clown. Hospital clowning is a field that is wonderful if you've ever watched the movie Patch Adams. If not, highly recommended. Basically, coming and curing people with laughter and joy. That's the tip of the fork, as we say in Hebrew, al-qtzeh hamazleg. But I learned the skills, and I volunteered in hospitals and organizations. And this is actually a photo from a Zoom that I held a few months ago, sharing my skills. This is with a few children in a congregation in Maryland that I taught a few months ago before COVID and all that, right before we were quarantining, and teaching them and sharing that love. I will share that this Thursday at 7 p.m. after, almost at the end of Tisha B'Av, I'm going to hold a session about medical clowning and talking about the meaning behind it. Also sharing a video of an interview with a friend of mine, a colleague from Israel, and it's going to be very interesting. You can find more information in the future on Facebook. So I learned and I loved doing this. Israel is in the forefront of medical clowning. Israel medical clowns go into the operation room and help the doctors while the patient is going into the OR, and they're helping with procedures as much as they can, unlike a lot of other places in the world. So this is also one of my passions and one of the things I love. I always say that I take clowning very seriously. Here's my nose right here next to me. Clowning is no matter for a joke. Okay, remember that. So I told you I'm also a theater person, so I had the privilege of performing in different things. Mostly, it'll be funny because it was in Israel, mostly English-speaking theater, with a lot of Jewish Americans coming to Israel. There are a lot of small groups of independent English-speaking theaters. So I had the privilege in performing in different ones. I I was on Fiddler on the Roof as Motel, the what do you call it? Help me here with the word. Motel, who is
Taylor.
Taylor. Thank you. I lost the word. I was a cat on Cats. I was a pirate on Peter Pan. I took a part in the cabaret show. And Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, I was one of the brothers in different roles, actually in Hebrew, in another theater. I also did a lot of street theater and different things. This is a part of who I am and the passion that I love. Theater is big in Israel. And as I mentioned, also English-speaking theater, because of a large English-speaking population, especially in Jerusalem, in Ra'anana, and other places, with a lot of people who made Aliyah and are still preserving their language from Israel, from England, or any other English-speaking countries. Not that there are too many. So I mentioned before the summer camps and the Jewish Agency for Israel, JAFI. After my first summer in 2006, I joined the team that actually holds the screening process and training the new shlichim going to summer camps. I joined in 2006, and I worked there for 13 years. This photo is from last year, my last year there, with the team that I worked with last year. I worked there for 13 years in different positions, working with Jewish summer camps, Jewish communities, working with shlichim who are training the shlichim who are going to be the next generation of shlichim, and different projects. I was a director, educational director of a project that trains shlichim who are going back to camp, just like I went to camp over and over again, and developed different curriculums, and worked with JCCA, Ramah, URJ, Reconstructionist camps, all different types of organizations and movements, including Young Judea, Habonim Dor, other youth movements in North America, to bring Israel to them. So that's also my career path for 13 years, which brought me to come here and become a long-term shaliach, to maintain that connection, not just for 2 months over the summer, but to be here for a longer period of time of 2-3 years, and actually engaging not just with the teens, with the children, and with the staff at camp, but with the wider community here in North America.
And we're all so lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And now, I told you a little bit about picking up the guitar, but beyond that, there's so much with my connection to music. I love listening to old records. This was my music corner in my old apartment, with my record player and the records that I stole from my parents that I grew up with Bob Dylan, Elton John, Simon Garfunkel, Queen, Joan Baez, Jody Collins, Cat Stevens, all those. I feel like I was born at the wrong decade. But one of my favorite songs that I'm also going to play a part of is by Simon Garfunkel. And definitely the identity of my music as a singer-songwriter comes from mostly the folk singers that I love to listen to. Not Elvis Presley, but Simon Garfunkel, Bob Dylan, Cat Stevens, and many, many others, also Israelis that are worth listening to. But one of my most favorite songs ever is this one. I am just a poor boy, though my story seldom told. I've squandered my resistance for a pocket full of mumbles, such are promises. All lies and jest till the man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. When I left my home, my family, I was no more than a boy in the company of strangers, in the quiet of the railway stations, running scared, laying low, seeking out the cold quarters where the ragged people go, looking for the place only they will know. La la la, la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Definitely one of my favorite songs, and the crescendo in the chorus. La la la. That, oh my God, gives me the chills just to think about it, even not listening to it. So this is my musical passion. And I started writing songs around, my first song I wrote was in 2004, was a love song for someone I met that it didn't really work out. It was a story of Alice and the rabbit from Alice in the Wonderland, sort of like as a metaphor to it. And then the next song I wrote was actually only in 2009. And I started writing songs slowly. And after a breakup, something made me want to do more of that. So I started writing more songs. At the end of 2010, I decided to try and perform. So I started going to open mic nights, and I would go every week and play. And some friends would come, and I would play a lot of covers because I didn't have a lot of songs. And one day, the owner of the place said, "Hey, how about you play a whole gig, a whole show?" And I said, "Why not?" So my first real gig, my first show, was in February 2011. And if I look back at the videos, not good, not good at all. But since then, I got to perform in so many places, in so many venues. This is from one of the open mic nights way back in 2011. This is me playing at Freddy Lemon in the Shuk, in the market in Jerusalem. This is in Yafo, Urbano, in Jaffa, at the Shuk in Jaffa. This is in another place called Hanale in Jerusalem. This is at Rockwood Music Hall in New York. So I got to perform in Maryland, in New York, and in Haifa, in Beersheba, and in kibbutzim and different places around Israel. And I was so privileged to do so. And here, a close friend of mine, Ohad, who joined me as a guitar player, and we actually wrote a song together also, and he would accompany me. And I started collecting and compiling different songs, and came a day where I decided that it's time for me to record them. And I recorded this album, Kmo Pa'am, or as you know it now, Like We Used to. And I use the method of crowdfunding, putting on Head Start, which is like a Kickstarter in Israel, and I managed to get 106% of the amount of money I needed in order to produce my album. And after a long time of working on it, of basically 2 years working and recording and producing, I had the album out, and it was such an excitement. And I feel like I now have this child that is out there, and I did something that will last forever, actually. Even if not too many people listen to it, it's still out there. And I'm so privileged to be able to, like I said, with that inner child, make a dream come true. There's the line in Shir Shalom, Al tagidu yom yavo, haviu et hayom. Don't say a day will come, make it come. That's what I said about the music and the album. I can keep saying one day I'll perform, one day I'll record. I had to make it come, and I did that. Another thing I really, really love is the music scene in Jerusalem of busking, playing on the street. Right here, I'm playing on Ben Yehuda Street in these two photos. Busking is something that I love, especially during the summer, not so much in the winter. But I would try and go every Friday morning to Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem and play music and busk and bring joy to people. And make a little money also. And I would do it sometimes right after work. In the right corner, you see me busking in Central Park in New York. So this is something that is so unique, and you see this increasing. I was a busker for about 8 years in Jerusalem. And when I started, there were street musicians, but not as many. And now so many street musicians in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, and other places. And I just love the immediate connection with the crowd that comes through busking. And as I said, this whole career of the theater, the education, the music, all brought me to here and now, to working with the Jewish community, with the Israelis here in the community, bringing that connection. And what I try to do with the soundtrack of my life is bring that connection through the music that I love. And I chose this week to bring you the real, not that the other sessions were not the real soundtrack of my life, but in this case, even more, my own story and the soundtrack. And I tried to also incorporate a lot of things we talked about in other sessions to show my story through my music and share that with you. And I'll give you time for remarks and questions before we finish with one more song. I want to just finish with that one. So please, if you have questions or anything. Deborah.
Well, I just want to say I have enjoyed these sessions so much, and enjoyed so much learning not only about your life but about Israel and how the two interplay. But also as a side note, when you were talking about education and everything else, I just want to tell you that when we had Shabbat dinner last week with my grandchildren, my granddaughter Leah started out with, do you know Shai from the JCC? And she apparently has had some session with you last Friday. My
Yeah, we have
granddaughter's
Shabbat
6 years
together, yeah.
old, and she's 6 years old, and she just went on and on about how great it was.
Thank
So
you.
for
Yeah.
that too.
Success. Joseph, my friend.
What's the Hebrew name of the album? It's Kamo.
Kmo Pam.
Oh, like time.
Exactly. And it
Oh,
means pa means, you know, like once upon a time, in a way, in the past.
Thank
Well,
you so much for these sessions. By the way, that song was the one that I told you, like, I think a month or two ago that I listened to that I really liked. So
Thank
it was
you.
cool to hear the background story.
Yeah, I love sharing it. Thank you so much. It means so much that you listen to my music also. And it was a pleasure for 4 months being here every week with these sessions, with the songs, the Israeli songs that I love and the stories behind them. And thank you for this privilege. And I want to finish with a song, which is the closing song from my album, both in the Hebrew version and the English version. That is the only song that is in Hebrew on the English album. It's called Oh, Light. And you have the translation, the words and the lyrics here. And I hope you enjoy it. And I wish us all great big light. Oh, גדול עומד בפתח, הוא יבוא לפתח, הדאגות אז ייעלמו ברגע, אם נדע לחיות יותר נכון, שלא הכל ידוע, אך עתיד פתוח, להכל, להכל. אור גדול עומד בפתח, הוא יבוא לפתח, כן, כן, הדאגות אז ייעלמו ברגע, אם נדע לחיות יותר נכון, שלא הכל ידוע, אך עתיד פתוח, להכל, להכל. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. And we will see you soon on other sessions.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
תודה
להתראות.
לכם. שבוע טוב, להתראות.
תודה רבה.
Good tov.
Bye bye.